my guest, Robert Bortins, is he's CEO of Classical Conversations. He's no stranger to our show and our network, and he's been fighting government education systems for decades. And he believes the ESA policy, the ESA political play, is a bad play. So, Robert, welcome to the show, man. Great to have you back on.
Gabe, thanks for having me. Appreciate you allowing me to come on and talk about this important subject, which I don't think is being addressed properly by either side.
Yeah, so we're wanting to fight the government monopoly on education, and the reason why that monopoly is largely there is because they actually can control the money. So, in the midst of it's complicated. In the midst of this cultural battle, do you think education vouchers are a good temporary victory in all this?
I do not. So I'm reminded of Ronald Reagan when he said the 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." And apparently a lot of Republicans and conservatives have forgotten that. And really, government funding of education is a form of socialism. And this just expands socialism. Whoever holds the purse strings will dictate how it goes. And of course, you talked about idolatry. And this is really Christian idolatry of government funds, which we know right now the government is funding the LGBTQIA plus initiatives, and all the moral decay of the country has really come from government funding of education. And so this ESA money isn't a form of free market like they claim it is. It's really the government now paying and dictating the entire market. So they're taking eventually your freedoms away. So I don't think the follow the money idea is really catchy and it sounds good.
Right.
But it's really creating children who will have their entire lives paid for by the government, from free food to education. They're going to turn 18 and they're going to go to college and get that paid for. And then they're going to be 23 and ask, why isn't the government paying for my housing? Why don't we have UBI? Why don't we have Medicare for all? And the conservatives are not going to have an answer for that, because you've just conditioned them for the last 18 to 22 years of their lives that the government should pay for all of these things. And so it's definitely not conservative. It's definitely not Christian, these ESA vouchers.
Now, it seems to me the money is a critical point of failure for the public schools. So if you figure out how to maybe disentangle some of the money, you actually are getting at a critical failure point for public education. So wouldn't that, taking away kind of the monopoly of how the funds are being distributed to public schools and allow it to follow the student, and then now the student can choose, well, I'm going to take my education money, instead of going to the public school, I'm going to go to the Classical Conversations or to the Christian school down the road. Do you not see the money as being able to kind of play with that critical failure point as a good thing?
Well, I think as a free market capitalist, I think that's a terrible thing, because it's socialism. I understand that argument, but you're not creating less public school students. You're creating more public school students. And so when you might sign up this first year and there might not be a lot of strings attached, but there's always issues down the road. And yeah, maybe you have conservative Christian legislators today. That doesn't mean you're not going to have, progressive LGBTQ legislators in the future. I mean, just look at all the ways that the government has used COVID to clamp down on private enterprise, to clamp down on colleges. Can they open? Can they not open? Hey, if you don't do this, you're not going to receive grants. You see the fight in the federal government right now over Title IX, and going to force colleges who take federal money to let boys use women's bathrooms. So with the money comes the power. And if you think of like the conservative mindset, typically small government, lower taxes. Well, if property taxes are now giving you $7,000 a year to educate your kid, are you ever going to ask the government to lower your property tax? Hell no, right? You're going to ask them to raise it. And so, yeah, you might get, the teachers unions might get weaker and those things in the short term, but in the long term, it's just going to create socialists out of all of us. We're all socialists now.
Right.
And, I think that's very dangerous. And the individuals pushing ESAs haven't thought about what this does to the child's mindsets, to the parents' mindsets over the long term, and what it's going to look like 10, 20 years from now.
Right.
To me, this is the progressives. This should be like the progressives should be championing this. I mean, every progressive dream that they have of how the United States should look like is now 20 years away from existence. They just got to hold out till these kids are voters and have spent, their entire lives being paid for by the government. Why should the government stop now?
I've actually seen a couple progressive teachers actually be in favor of this, public school teachers be in favor of this. So what's your plan? What's your proposal then? With millions of children involved in our government schools, what do you see as, an incremental way or maybe sound policies kind of for ending government schools? I mean, like, government schools are so entangled in our culture. So I kind of like the bridge that ESA might provide, but what would you think of incremental play to run here?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing to do is just what you talked about in your opening monologue. Like, as Christians, as our church, as business leaders, we need to be starting schools. We need to help people see that there's a different way, that you do not need socialism to educate your children, that you don't need paper, an expensive piece of paper to get a job. I love that new Big Ed ad that New St. Andrews has out.
So good.
All of those things that we're fighting for on a daily basis. I mean, there's ACCS schools, there's classical conversations, there's private schools all around this country that are out there fighting this fight already, and you just need to join them. Like, find out, like, if you don't have any kids and you're a business owner, call that local private school and say, hey, do you guys take government money? No. Okay, I would love to provide, a scholarship. I would love to figure out how to get more people in it, and then just let people know about it. I mean, we need to get students out of the public school, lower our property taxes, and increase our freedom. And, it creates, we need to be a Christian mindset. We got to go, as Jesus said, that second mile. As educators, as parents, as Christians, and really, we don't need to become welfare queens, and the ESAs just make everyone welfare queens. And how are you going to argue against other forms of welfare when the conservatives are pushing this? I mean, think about how outraged all these people are about Joe Biden forgiving $10,000 of student debt.
That's right.
Right? Think about how outraged. In Arizona, they're planning on giving every student $7,000 of forgiveness every single year from the taxpayer. Every year for 12 years of their lives, they're going to get student loan forgiveness of $7,000. So, I mean, why not? Like, we should be cheering on what Biden's doing. Why don't we just forgive all $2 trillion? That would be wonderful. But people haven't been asking the right questions. And they haven't been looking at it the right way, because they hear people that they normally agree with pushing this idea, but they haven't thought about it in the wide scope of things.
Robert Bortins causing problems since he was born, probably for his mother first, and now for ESA accounts. Thanks for coming on the show, Robert.
Thanks for having me.